Geek Out! You wanted the best, and you got me instead. That's right, another episode of Kiss My Podcast. This week, I'm bringing back an old friend to help me out here, because we're going to do something kind of interesting, kind of cool this episode, or maybe none of those at all. We're going to be talking about all 4 solo Kiss albums, not track by track, because the episodes are already like an hour long when we're talking about one album. Although we could probably shave it down to 3 hours because there's really not much to say about Peter Criss. But
you don't like the song That's the Kind of Sugar Papa Likes?
Nope. Although I do, I was like, I picked a favorite track from each album that we could talk about. That is my favorite because of the title only. Anyway, if you haven't guessed, Sam Stone is back on the show. Thank you for coming back on, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Sam's the guy that, like, whenever I don't have someone lined up or someone, like, is like, I don't want to talk about all 4 Kiss solo albums. I'm like, hey, Sam, you want to talk about all 4?
I want to talk about Lethal Weapon 3.
Yeah, you want to talk about Lethal Weapon 3? Okay, let's talk about Lethal Weapon 3. You want to talk about all 4 solo Kiss albums? Yeah, sure. Anyway, so yeah, basically, again, we're talking about all 4 solo Kiss albums. What we're going to do this episode, though, because it's just free-flowing and doing whatever we want, we're going to touch on all 4 Kiss albums. We got facts, we got notes, we got numbers about all 4 Kiss albums. We could talk about favorite tracks. We could talk about ridiculous song titles as well. We could talk about Disney covers, because we will. But also, let's talk about kind of, a follow-up. The last episode we did was Love Gun. Kiss, I would say, at their most confident. Mike pointing out last episode that the kind of the faux confidence of Destroyer is what helped them egg them on, but really Love Gun is what really cemented them as their Kiss at their most confident, and probably at their most confident we'll ever see.
I mean, there's a certain amount of hubris it takes for all 4 members of a band to each release a solo album simultaneously.
Yeah.
And by certain amount of hubris, I mean lots of fucking hubris.
I mean, again, this is the band that wears makeup, spits fire, spits blood, all the above. I mean, this is a band that was like had a drum riser, and by drum riser, it was like 2 guys with pulleys picking up Peter Criss at a show, and they're playing in front of like 3 people. This is a band that has been waiting to get to this moment, and they finally have. I don't know if I asked you on the episode that you were on, Sam, for Destroyer, but who was your favorite member of Kiss and why?
Still, it's always been between Paul Stanley and Ace Frehley.
Okay.
Paul, because he's I think he's the best showman. He's basically like a less douchey Gene Simmons.
Okay.
and Ace Frehley, because he can just come up with some really cool riffs.
Well, I think again, another thing about this episode we're going to do here is we're going to talk about kind of just the members, just as themselves. What we like, what we don't like. Mostly what we like, because we want to be positive on the show. But
we have to talk about the Peter Criss.
Again, we're trying to be positive. That's why we're not talking about it very long. But yeah, I mean, I think Paul Stanley's the type of guy that really he has a real bite to him when and he'll defend what he believes in like a wild animal, and
like Lennon and the Beatles.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously not to that extent, but as Lennon would. But I think if you're putting the 4 solo albums, all released, September 18th, 1978, on the same day, like I said, a very expensive day for Kiss fans, because they were all full price.
They're all full albums.
Yeah, full albums, all full price. It's the Lose Your Illusion 1 and 2.
They all sell. They all sell decently well.
Mm-hmm,
it's pretty clear which sells the worst and which are among the ones that sell better.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, looking at these solo albums, you can it kind of sums up Kiss and their personalities, which is kind of
sums up the band.
Yeah, I mean, it really does, because if you look at Ace. And I'm not just saying because Ace is my favorite. I mean, he far and away has the, his is not the highest charting one, but the biggest single with New York Groove. I think it was number 13 on the Billboard charts, singles charts. But a guy that is just so confident, again, coming off that Love Gun, first vocal performance, and just really having nothing else holding him back.
Yeah, because for all intents and purposes, this isn't Kiss doing 4 albums fronted by a different member of the band.
Sure.
This is each member of the band going off with their own, like background musicians, their own list of songs.
Yeah.
And they're fucking doing their own album.
Exactly. And again, it's showing the strengths and it's showing the weaknesses. Like, it's warts and all. It's all there. So in really no specific order, I guess, really. Let's start with Gene. Let's start with old Gene Simmons.
Gene Simmons has probably got the most surprising album.
He's got some really cool stuff on there. I would put him. I'd put him. If I'm ranking these, we'll just put it out right now. Ace is number 1. I'd actually put Gene as number 2 because he goes for it. He doesn't succeed in all of them, but he's got some really interesting stuff he's going for.
The ambition there.
The Beatles' influence shows a lot on this.
Yeah.
I put Paul third because it's solid. Like it's just it's a solid.
Paul's is basically a Kiss album.
It really is. I mean, again, and he's killing it on all the Kiss studio stuff. So it's just solid. But Gene, I get it.
I might put Paul's over Ace's.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. And then, well, I'm glad you said that because we'll have some differences then. And then, Peter Criss is last, but that's almost just unfair to say. But we'll talk. We'll talk about it. It's not necessarily all because it's just terrible.
It's not a badly produced album.
Yeah, and I just don't really like it. And
it's just the least essential album of 1978.
Yeah, or the 70s, or vinyl, or sound.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, let's go back to the Gene. Let me spit out some just quick notes here. Recorded at The Manor in Oxfordshire, England. Cherokee Studios, Los Angeles, California. Blue Rock Studio, New York City, April to July 1978. Produced by Gene and Sean Delaney, a Kiss My Podcast favorite. We talked a lot about on the Rock and Roll Over stuff. Singles, only one, Radioactive, which I think is a pretty solid track. It's got a really weird intro. There's a lot of weird intros on the Gene Simmons one. Billboard, this is the highest placed Kiss album on Billboard. I think because of the cover, got a little bit of the blood dribble on the side of his mouth, and it's Gene. His image. His image is Kiss. He kind of is Kiss when you think of it.
I feel like in the kind of the more the Kiss Army heavy areas, which is to say like the Midwest and the South.
Yeah.
I feel like here we're a little more northern, and we're big fans of Ace and Paul. I feel like more in like within the Kiss Army, Gene is like far and away like the most popular.
Yeah, I mean, my brother talked, very fondly about Gene, and I like Gene. He's just got some weird stuff to say, and he's got, he's not afraid to say it. And there's
most of it's for the headlines.
Sure, it is, but I think at the and I think real quick again, it charted number 22. Just real quick, we're saying that if I had said already. I think that him covering "When You Wish Upon a Star," even though it's so fucking out of its mind. It's really sweet that he did that because when he again, he's born in Israel, he's not born in New York, even though he's a New York guy. That's a song that when he didn't know any English, he knew what those words meant, kind of thing. And I don't know, again, I don't think it necessarily works, but I think it's a sweet moment, and I think Gene has those moments on this album. Again, we kind of talked influences, Beatles. There's a lot of the Beatles on there. You got some funk, got some disco, of course, you got some rock, some Gene notes. Gene doesn't play bass on this album. The bass player does not play bass on the album.
Yeah.
He plays the electric guitar, acoustic guitar, and of course the vocals. Here's the list.
You once called Gene perhaps the best vocalist within Kiss.
I do, and I know that again, people are like, what the fuck? What the fuck do? But the reason I say that is because when he's not doing the I think he's got some solid stuff. My go-to is Journey of a Thousand Years. Off of Psycho Circus, which is one of my favorite Kiss tracks. Again, people are going, what the fuck, do? But his vocals on that are fucking wonderful. And I think that, and again, no disrespect to Paul, because Paul is the goddamn gorilla glue that holds Kiss together. Anyway, so let me throw out some names who are on this album, because out of all four albums, the track listing for Gene's is fucking huge. Okay, here we go. So we got Joe Perry. Okay, plays guitar on Radioactive. Bob Seger, vocals on Radioactive and Living in Sin. Rick Nielsen, of Cheap Trick fame. Guitar on See You in Your Dreams, which is funny about See You in Your Dreams because that was on Rock and Roll Over, because he didn't like the way it was produced on that one, so he did it on this one. The Rock and Roll Over one is fucking 1,000 times better. I'm just throwing that out there. Sorry, Gene. No, no offense, Rick Nielsen. It's not your fault.
Yeah, he's one of the most underrated guitarists around.
Yeah, I don't like See You in Your Dreams is so great on Rock and Roll Over. I do not like this version. And Mr. Skunk Baxter from the Doobies, guitar on Burning Up with Fever. See You Tonight, Tunnel of Love, and Mr. Make Believe. And we get Cher, who does the
they were dating at the time.
Yeah. The spoken word phone call on Living in Sin, which is something I feel like Prince does later on a lot on the Love Symbol album with what's her face, Carmen Electra. Donna Summer does the backing vocals of Burning Up with Fever and Tunnel of Love, and Katie Segal, an unknown Katie Segal at the time, provided backing vocals on this album. Of course, would go on for Futurama fame, Married to Children fame, and Sons of Anarchy fame, just to name a few. She's had a kick-ass TV career. If you think about
that's what she's mostly known for.
Yeah, I mean her husband was the creator of Sons of Anarchy, I think.
Kurt Sutter.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, like badass career in Katie Seagal, and I've heard her talk about it before. Just kind of like, oh yeah, you'd go in. But again, she wasn't like she is now. But it's kind of hindsight. Look back. Oh, she did backing vocals on this. I mentioned "See You in Your Dreams" again. It just I don't know. I don't know why Gene felt it was necessary. It's his song. Whatever, you can do whatever he wants with it. I just didn't like it. Do you have a favorite track on this album? If you had to pick one,
It's probably Radioactive.
Radioactive is solid.
It's just a solid choice.
One of the reasons I'd put this album as number 2, and it really is a fine line between 2 and 3 with the Gene and Paul, is the song "Man of a Thousand Faces." I think that song is really interesting, and it's kind of something that not a lot of people would have heard from Gene if you're just listening to the Kiss stuff. Because I feel like here's something I just kind of thought of out loud in my head. Gene's album, I think he experiments and does kind of the solo album better than anybody, in the sense that he's not creating another Kiss album. He's not creating just a rock and roll album. He's actually trying to do something different.
Which you could argue Peter's trying to do too.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Peter's wearing his influence on his sleeve with the jazz stuff, and the funk. I don't, but again, okay. I like listening to Gene's more than Peter's. I'm sorry. It's going to be, again, one of the reasons I've tried to say nice things about Peter all up to this point is because I knew I was going to get to this point where it's just a fucking mess of an album. I'm sorry.
Look at his solo album and you're just like, oh.
God damn it. I'm sorry, Peter. I want to say real quick before we go on, Araldo Kuragati is the guy who painted all the covers for the 4 Kiss albums. Solid Kiss album cover. I mean, all the covers are great. Really striking is just their face and just wonderful. And it's always got like the hue, hue of the color that kind of represents them: the blue, green, purple, and red. So again, we're not really necessarily going to talk track by track, because again, the album, this would be a 4-hour podcast. But again,
the last hour would just be us kicking the shit out of another album.
Yeah. But the cool thing about this one, again, Gene is writing every single track. He's on here at all of them, of course, except for When You Wish Upon a Star. He did not write that song. Living in Sin is the only one where you got Sean Delaney and Howard Marks co-writing it with Gene as well. But again, Gene taking the reins, playing guitar, not playing bass, weirdly enough, and putting in an interesting solo out. This one always kind of falls in, like when you go on like Pitchfork and all these other places. It's kind of just like 50-50 for this album, which is cool, because I feel like a lot of people, when they think of Gene, they're like, it's just fucking, cheap garbage plaster caster, which is not garbage. But, the kind of just, ridiculousness and all that kind of stuff. But again, I think it's a solid, fine album.
It's okay. It's not... Honestly, none of these albums, as much as we shit on Peter Criss's albums, I don't actually think any of these albums are unlistenable per se. But there's certain albums where you're like right along with it, and there's certain albums where it's a little better than background noise.
Well, let's just say I only own one of these albums.
The Ace Frehley
album. And I mean, again, Gene's is not, again, re-listening to these guys.
They're all on Spotify, listeners.
Yeah, re-listening to these albums before doing this podcast, it's just, there's just a lot more filler on it. Again, this whole Kiss doing the 4 solo albums was a semi-inspiration for the Geek Out solo series. We weren't in a place where I feel like Kiss was, where Kiss was getting ready to implode and they needed to kind of like get out their creative differences. I don't think that was Geek Out at all. That was just us getting like, hey, let's just focus,
I think we were kind of getting to a point where we were feeling a little like we were going through the motions.
We were going through the motions, but then also like, the episodes were getting really long. And, we wanted to talk about just...
We hadn't started getting interviews yet.
True.
Either.
And we wanted to just talk about stupid stuff, just concentrate on singular things.
If I start talking about the Beatles on the regular show, Chris and Josh aren't going to be able to contribute that much. And that's not a slight to either of them. They're just not going to be able to contribute that much.
And
if you talk about Lethal Weapon, it'll be like you and me, and then Chris talking about Lethal Weapon 4.
Yeah. By the way, they're all on Netflix. So... And also the other big one too was what Kevin Smith is doing the Frasier podcast. I was like, you can seriously do a podcast about anything. You really can. The Laserdiscs is a perfect example. You can do a podcast about anything.
Yeah, you and I can't really contribute to Laserdiscs.
I cannot at all.
It's not that we hate the format. We just don't know that much.
I own 2, and one of them was bought by Chris. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that any other future ones will be bought by Chris. And they're both begin with the letter R. So anyway, that's Gene Simmons. If we didn't talk about your favorite track, I'm sorry. But we're not going to be doing track by track.
You know where to find us.
Yeah. Or just ask me on Twitter what I thought about When You Wish Upon a Star.
When you wish upon a star.
Let's talk about Tunnel of Love, the not Bruce Springsteen song.
Or
anyway,
album.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip ahead because I'm excited that you talked about Paul's with such
gusto.
Such gusto. Let's talk about fucking Paul Stanley, man. Because I love Paul Stanley. He's my second favorite member of Kiss.
Yeah.
Let me get the little fun, not so fun bits out of the way here real quick. Recorded February to July 1978. Electric Lady Studios, New York City. The Record Plant Studios, and the Village Recorder, Los Angeles, California. Produced by Paul Stanley and Jeff Glicksman. Singles. I hate this title. Hold Me, Touch Me, Think of Me When We're Apart. Surprisingly,
not my favorite song on the album.
No. I love Paul, but it was number 40 on the billboards, which is kind of surprising. I mean, because Paul is the frontman of Kiss.
Yeah.
And I if you would think it'd be like Gene, Paul, Ace, Peter. But again, Ace just has fucking meat to it. Anyway, some Paul notes. Let's do some Paul notes. Of course, lead and backing vocals, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, acoustic guitar, the EBow, which is kind of like a little device you can put on your guitar to kind of sound like it's like the Jimmy Page bow effect. And of course, Paul Stanley loves Jimmy Page. All guitars on Hold Me, Touch Me, Think of Me When We're Apart. That is cool, though. I do like that he put all the guitars down on that singular track, because the other guy dropping the lead guitar stuff on this is Bob Kulick. Bob Kulick, for any Kiss fans out there, you'll know him for two reasons. One, because he is part of, as I like to call, the sacred uncredited in Kiss, because he was he played on 3 of the 5 studio tracks in Alive 2. He plays the lead on Naked City and Unmasked, which I fucking love that song. I can't wait to get to that. Killer's a compilation album. He plays on all 4 studio tracks, the new studio tracks, and a bit part on Creatures of the Night. Creatures of the Night.
This is the beginning of his association.
Yeah, and so he tours with Paul Stanley in his 1989 solo tour as well. So not only that, though, he is the brother of Bruce Kulick, who becomes the lead guitar player of Kiss from 1984 to 1996. So two big the Kulick family is very important in the Kiss army, and of course he drops some shreddage on this album as well. Sam, what's your favorite track on this album?
Ooh, what's the name of the album opener again?
Tonight You Belong to Me.
What's the name of the second song?
Move On.
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I got written down. I got your back, because I can't remember all the shit anyway.
Not between 4 solo albums that I just revisited today.
Yeah, no. It's funny. I can kind of tell though you were jamming on Paul Stanley, because I could see on Spotify that you were listening to some Paul Stanley. I was like, good on you. But let's talk quick about Move On. Mikkel Japp, who he co-wrote on that track, he co-wrote Ain't Quite Right, and he co-wrote Take Me Away together as one. So again, but Paul Stanley writes, on all the rest of the tracks. A cool thing about this, not a single cover on this album. There is a cover on Gene's. There's a cover on Peter's. There is a cover on Ace's. No covers.
Ace's top single is the cover.
No covers on Paul's, which is kind of like vintage Paul Stanley. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like it's Maximum Stanley.
Maximum Stanley. I like the song Wouldn't You Like to Know? I feel like that's a real kind of bitchy ass kicker of Paul Stanley.
It's like even the songs that start slower eventually kind of kick her in the higher gear.
Yeah, I mean, he's got, it's all the Paul Stanleyisms are there. The
It's a Kiss album with no songs sung by Ace or Gene.
Yeah, or Peter or any of them playing on it. But you get a Kulick. Hey, if you get a Kulick, that's pretty cool, because I think Bruce Kulick is one of the greatest members of Kiss. A fucking stand-up dude, a real good guy. But yeah, Paul is just I don't know. He's the workhorse in Kiss. He very rarely writes poor tracks. Like, I mean, I would definitely not. I would probably even like I said, in terms of musicianship and song quality, this is better than Gene's. I just like that Gene swung for the fences and necessarily only hit a really long foul ball. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't necessarily hit a home run with it.
But unless they catch that foul, you're still in the game.
That's right. You're still up to bat. But then they swung and missed some music from the elder. But I think what was I going to say about Paul? Oh, so yeah, Paul.
Do you think he just plays it too safe?
Yeah, I mean he kind of does. He does have some moments of experimental music. You know, I mean, I think that the only single. It's got some moments on it where you're like, okay, what's going on here? What's happening here?
Which again is not my favorite song on the Paul Stanley solo album, but
Yeah.
hey,
I think
as a whole, if I'm going to Kiss, I'm going. I'm not, like I said on the Destroyer episode, I'm not necessarily the biggest Kiss fan.
Yeah.
I am a fan of just motherfucking rock and roll.
Yeah.
And for me, Kiss is just like dirty, simple rock and roll.
Yeah.
And that's best embodied, for me personally anyway, with Paul Stanley's solo album.
Paul Stanley's. Okay, that's solid. It's solid. If I was gonna, I mean, even though I would put Gene second, if I was gonna buy another solo album, it'd be Paul Stanley's. Because I just, and again, reading his book Face the Music, which I feel like I should be like sponsored for because I mentioned it so many times. It's such a damn good read, and it's such a fascinating look at how Paul Stanley really held this band together. I mean, I don't think that guy gets enough credit for how well
basically keeps it alive in the 80s.
Keeps it alive in the 80s, and he never half-asses it with Kiss. You know, unfortunately, I can't say the same for Gene. I mean, nowadays I wouldn't say that about Gene, but there's a period where Gene, would even say he would.
Yeah, he's thinking
say
about
he
acting.
did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Ace and Peter, that's part of their downfall.
Well, at this point, like, Peter's already halfway out the door.
Peter is basically out the door. I mean, we talked about kind of his, hooligan, his kind of farewell without knowing it's a farewell on Love Gun. But let's jump in the Ace freely, though. Let's jump in the Ace. Good old Ice, whose first name's really Paul, but you can't have two Pauls in the band. That'd be confusing. So again, my favorite of the solo albums. I feel like that's kind of the standard. That's most people's favorite. Just because some people are like surprised, but if you look back and you just put together the songs that he wrote, not necessarily saying, of course, you're like, of course he'd have the best solo album. You know what I mean? This guy is Aces. Get out of here. Anyway, recorded June to July 1978, Plaza Sound Studios, New York, New York. The mansion in Sharon, Connecticut. So, which is weird because you think he's just like a New York guy through and through, but he's busted out in Connecticut. Eddie Kramer and Ace produced it. Eddie Kramer, everybody loves Eddie Kramer. The guy's a fucking beast. So of course it's gonna sound great, and it does. Singles, New York Groove. We have all kinds of stories about New York Groove. We can go into, and then the Billboard, it reaches number 26, so it's almost at the top, but it does have the highest selling of the four. Some quick notes about old Ice. Anton Fig. Every time I watch the Dave Letterman show or whatever it is, the late night show with David Letterman, the latest late of the late shows with David Letterman. Anton Fig, every time I saw him, I love it for two reasons. One, because he plays drums on this album, and two, he's part of the Sacred Uncredited. He is drummer on the entire album, and he also is the uncredited drummer on Dynasty and Unmasked. That's right, it's not Peter Criss. He, as well, along with bassist Will Lee, who plays on Ozone, I'm in Need of Love, and Wiped Out. He's the bassist in the world's most dangerous band, of course, the Late Night with David Letterman and the Late Show with David Letterman. So I like that. I always like seeing Anton Fig and being like, that dude is like just as big a part of Kiss as anyone else is, even though no one knew it. Now they do, of course, the internet and everything. And I just said it. Ace plays, of course, lead and backing vocals, lead and rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar synth, and bass. Ace Frehley, man, this is a masterclass in just great solo leads.
A
here.
tour de force.
It is. Do you have a favorite track on this album? I have a feeling I know. But...
Yeah, it's been tempered by just years of nostalgia. At this point.
Yeah.
Every time I'm in New York City, I
That's
have to
right.
listen to it. It's almost like a tradition.
I know whenever Sam has reached and got into New York City, because he'll text me that he's back in the New York groove.
And it's out of all of the solo albums, the only song I know.
Yeah. Wait till you hear Gene's When You Wish Upon a Star.
I can't wait.
It's a song so momentous. Chris Nolan must join us.
Yeah.
I am, of course, talking about New York Groove.
Yeah.
Many years since I was here.
Written by Russ Ballard, of course. Not
the only
Ace.
solo Kiss song, as far as I can tell, that Kiss plays live.
Yes.
And was the inspiration for one of our first running gags between Sam and I. because of the way that he goes back and then holds the microphone out to the audience and then pulls it back to him.
Yeah, he gets like halfway and then he's like, wait, I'm not going to let them sing.
I have to say the second back.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going back in my hole.
Back in the New York groove. Go back, Chris.
Get back to where you once belong. We'll get there.
Yeah, we will. The roles will be reversed. So again, Ace writing all the tracks on here. You got a couple things. You got Larry Kelly writing "Rip It Out" along with Ace, and Jeanette Fraley with "Speeding Back to My Baby," and I don't mean maybe. Great fucking opening of that track. The lead on that is just insane. I love everything about this album. I love all the tracks. I'd put this above some of even the classic Makeup era Kiss albums because I think it's just Ace. If we're talking about Love Gun being Ace of them, being Kiss the most confident, this solo album is Ace just shoving it down the critic's throat and just letting him know that this guy is a world class musician and knows how to fucking rock and roll. Sam's talking about just great dirty down and out rock and roll. This is the toppermost of the poppermost for me. Although I say that, and my favorite track is Fractured Mirror. Fractured Mirror, of course, the instrumental that closes out the album is this. I love songs. The Angel and the One is my favorite Weezer track as well, the closer on the Red album. And what both songs kind of do, Angel and the One does a little more intense, is it follows one instrument and really one kind of phrase. And every couple bars, it adds another layer to it. So at the beginning of the song, you have kind of a bell and just an acoustic guitar. And by the end of it, you have a fucking orchestra of instruments. And then it goes back to the single instrument. Angel in the One is very similar. Of course, you have the vocals, Rivers' kind of angelic vocals to kind of add it as well. But I think that track is just really one of my favorite ones. I mean, when I was writing the notes for this and listening to all the albums again, I just kept listening, of course, to this album most, but Fractured Mirror just the most, because I think it's a really cool Ace track that you wouldn't necessarily expect from him.
This is the album I probably listened to the least with my revisit, just because I've heard the Ace Frehley album.
Yeah,
it's good. It's great. I think the only reason I give Paul Stanley the nod over Ace is because it's just more. When I'm thinking Kiss, it's more within that mindset, and maybe that's the secret. Maybe I need to just be like, these aren't Kiss albums per se; they're just fronted solo albums by members of Kiss.
Yeah, and Ace, I think, has the most interesting solo career because he's really had a solo career since. They've all released albums since, but Ace has been not necessarily at a steady pace. There's been some trouble here and there with Fraley's Comets, which is Anton Fig was the drummer for as well. But his most recent work as well has been really awesome, and him and Paul working together again, it's really kind of cool. But I mean, if you're a fan of Ace and you haven't heard it, listen to it as soon as you can. I think you'll love it. It has everything you love about Ace in it. It has some surprises in it. Like we said, all the albums have surprises, pleasant or unpleasant. It's really up to the listener to make that decision. But all the tracks, I mean, Snowblind, Ozone are two of the ones I remember when I first got the album at Tower Records in the Fairfax Town Center. I bought that, and I bought the Rumble in the Jungle VHS on the same day. I think those are the two purchases I bought. But those, I mean, Snowblind and Ozone were two tracks to listen to as well. It just was everything I wanted to hear from Kiss. And wasn't able to, and also because of Ace's insecurities as a singer, he just goes for it on this. And it's great. It really is. It's just I can't say enough about Ace's solo album. That's the one I could have spent the entire 50 minutes talking about. But we have one more to talk about, Sam. We have one more to talk about, Samuel.
Yeah.
We do.
Kind of like in Tarantino movies, particularly like the 90s Tarantino movies, where they're like in these like grimy bars, and there's always like this weird like obscure 70s track that plays in the background, almost like lounge music. Mm-hmm. That's the Peter Criss album. I mean, it's not literally the Peter Criss album, but that's what the Peter Criss album sounds like.
The Peter Criss album is, remember how we always used to say it's got to be somebody's favorite?
Yeah. Statistically speaking, there's at least one person whose favorite Peter Criss or favorite Kiss solo album is the Peter Criss album, and that person is Peter Criss.
Peter Criss. Look, man,
look, again, it's not badly produced. It's not like the production value suddenly like bottoms out. It's just the least essential, least interesting, least charismatic album of the four.
Again, I've never recorded. I'm not a fucking like recorded musician here, but like there are tracks on a solo album that like other people wrote, like not necessarily covers, like people wrote for him. You know,
could argue people wrote Beth for him.
yeah, you could argue that. Anyway, let's shed some interesting stuff on Peter Criss, because again, it's so easy to do it, and I try not to, but god damn it, Peter Criss. You know, if he wasn't such a doucher sometimes too, it would be a lot easier not to do it. Anyway, recorded April to July 1978, Electric Lady Studios, New York City. Burbank Studios, Burbank, California. Sunset Sound Studios, Hollywood, California. Produced by Vinny Pocina. Co-writer of Ringo Starr in the 1970s. Of the actual man. He co-wrote the man himself. He co-wrote a lot of his stuff in the 70s and also played on a bunch of his solo albums. And we will be hearing more from this Vinny guy when it comes to Dynasty and Unmasked. So, keep your ears open for that. Here is the biggest note I have about this album. I swear to God. Okay, it has 2 singles. That's the biggest note I could find for this.
Even Gene Simmons only has 1 single.
Yeah, it's the only one with 2 singles out of all 4 Kiss albums, or all 4 solo tracks. Don't You Let Me Down, and you did, Peter Criss. You fucking did, and you matter to me. I wish you did more, Peter Criss. God damn it. Billboard number 43. It's only three below Paul Stanley.
Yeah, God, I'm sorry, Paul.
I know. You should have been around in 1978. You could have helped a man.
If only you hadn't released all 4 albums on the same fucking day.
If you met Paul Stanley in real life, in your life, if you met Paul Stanley, I guess that would be the perfect time to tell my Paul Stanley story too. But if you met Paul Stanley, would you talk to him about the solo album the most?
No.
I
would be like, hey, man, Paul Stanley, and he'd be like, yeah, and yeah, he'd kind of sound like Van Halen or David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
Apparently, he produced the first Van Halen album, co-produced it, or at least him and Gene are like, we discovered Van Halen. And it's like, all right, but there's only 2 good Van Halen albums. No, I would just basically, I'd be like, yo, good work, and then I would go about
work.
Then I would go about my day.
Good work. Yeah. The dude's been in the music industry for 40 years, and this man walks up to him, this fucking man-child. This man walks up to him, this fucking man, and he goes, good work.
And then just keeps walking.
And Paul Stanley just fucking shatters and just sobs into a million pieces. He's like, that's all I wanted.
If it's any consolation, Paul, it is a genuine good work.
Yeah, genuine good work.
It's not a condescending, patronizing good work.
Good work, Paul.
It's just, it's a genuine, like, good work. And then just, like, kind of like the one time I met Dave Grohl, it was just like, thanks, Dave. And then that was mainly because there was, like, a bunch of other fucking people. But, like, for my, like, 2-second interaction with Dave Grohl, it's just like, thanks.
Yeah.
And then,
good job with the EBO, Paul.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd compliment him on the EBO, but I would just be like, hey, cool.
Yeah, good work. Good job. That's fucking great. I thought I met Paul Stanley once. We went to San Diego Comic-Con, and Kiss was there. And the line was really long, and it was insane to even meet him. But I remember I was walking by where their booth was, and it was, of course, all shrouded in mystery, and the curtains closed. We'll get back to Peter Criss in a second.
But we don't have to.
We don't have to, but we will, just to appease them. And the curtains open, and like fucking Love Gun era Paul Stanley walks out. I was like, the fuck? But
which for you is like the highlight.
Yeah.
Of
and
Paul
so he walks out, like, right next to me. He starts walking up the stairs because there's, of course, Kiss. He's gonna be like, yeah. And so he turns, and I'm like right next to him, and. Okay, I found the perfect. Remember, the song. Speaking of "Kiss" by Prince. It's like, but like, it's awesome because it's Prince. Yeah, take all the awesome and Prince out, and it's me. That was the noise I made. I was like, and I was like, Jesus, and I kept walking. I was like, but then I kind of thought, I was like, why the fuck was Paul Stanley doing that and nobody else? I was like, he is the front man, but like, dude's been around for 40 years, I didn't even do this. And then they were all inside the thing, like, and they
had their own booth, basically.
They had their own booth,
closed off booth.
So you would go in, get a picture, whatever, sign, and there's them, Tommy Thayer, Eric Singer, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and they didn't have their makeup on. I'm assuming. I think that's what I heard from somebody saying.
Yeah, I feel like whenever they're not in concert or in promo videos, they're
and so that was that, and like there was no way I would have meet up with the line, and then I think there was like it was kind of like a line of the people who were guaranteed and the line of the people who pretty much weren't guaranteed, and they would stand there anyway, just hoping.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then I kind of put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, Kiss had left the next day, and that guy Paul Stanley was still there. And I was like, they didn't leave fucking Paul Stanley. So of course it was Paul Stanley. But for that moment, I felt like what it would have felt like to have met a member of Kiss, and it was pretty hysterically embarrassing.
Yeah. Closest thing I got to the Ringo Starr story.
Yeah. But
that's actually Ringo Starr.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah.
As far as I know,
Paul Stanley didn't call me out, and luckily nobody called me out when I saw them at Jiffy Lube. That would have been embarrassing. But Paul would have been like, "Hey, you," and like all the way in the back. I'm like, "Me?" He's like, "Yes, you, pudgy man." No, that was a great show. Anyway, let's finish strong with Peter.
Finish strong with Peter.
You know the first thing he said when he met Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley? "Hi, I'm Peter Criss. I have a 9-inch dick."
Oh, well, I guess if you got it.
Yeah. So anyway, Peter notes lead vocals, of course, drums on track 1 through 5, and drums on Hooked on Rock and Roll. Percussion on track Kiss the Girl Goodbye, and backing vocals. Good. Favorite track, That's the Kind of Sugar Papa Likes, simply for the title. I don't have anything else to say. I'm sorry.
That's my favorite song on that album too.
Okay.
Again,
it's like Sam said, it's background music to a shitty bar you don't want to be in.
it's a dive bar, and for some reason the jukebox can only play. They could only afford Peter Criss's solo album.
And I like that. Yeah, we got Peter Criss. I like to think that like he tried his hardest, but his heart wasn't in Kiss anymore.
This is the most drumming he does
ever again
for
Kiss.
a Kiss-related thing, not counting like the reunion tour.
Yeah, and that was just in the live stuff, and barely. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the 4 Kiss solo albums.
Again, they're all on Spotify. Listen to like 2 of them.
Yeah, it's a weird experience. I definitely, from the moment I came up with this idea to do the Kiss My podcast, I knew I wasn't going to do 4 separate episodes. One, because this is, as much as I love doing this, and I really do, it's going on for a long time. It's still got a ways to go, a couple months left. Like, less than a year.
Even at our accelerated schedule, which
it's still
is,
like
once
7 or
every
8
3
months.
weeks. Yeah,
it's still 7.
You haven't even gotten into the 80s yet.
No. And we got some. We got
Peter Criss is still technically part of the band.
Still, the original band is still all there technically, but like we're going to be getting some. The sad thing is, I feel like we're going to be getting more into behind the scenes stuff than actual Kiss stuff.
Yeah, we're about to do over on the Beatles podcast. We're about to do the White Album.
Yeah, it's actually perfect timing for the 2.
Yeah, and I was kind of doing some, I do some background research going into every episode, revisit the songs or whatever. And it's like the most heartbreaking stuff, at least in the case of the White Album. Like Kiss is breaking up and I'm doing like background research. I'm like, okay. If I'd like classic Kisses, and I'm just like, that's fine. And but the Beatles breaking up during the White Album section, and that's a long breakup.
Yes.
That's just heartbreaking for me.
It is. It's actually a perfect time for us to segue. We're going to throw it over to Chris and Jake in the future, who are going to be doing Deconstructing the Beatles and the White Album. Take it over.
Why are you doing it with Chris?
Chris and Jake?
You could.
Chris and Jake.
But I think Chris would just
it's Sam and Jake.
Yeah.
Chris and Jake in the future.
Chris can maybe talk about back in the USSR.
Yeah. Sam and Jake from the future.
My favorite Beatles song is off of the White Album.
While My Guitar Gently Weeps?
No.
Helter Skelter.
Yeah, Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
So listen to Chris and Jake.
And I do like back in the USSR.
No, I'm gonna throw it over to Sam and Jake in the future, and they're gonna talk about the White Album. Thanks for listening. Rock and roll night and party every day. Take it away, guys.
Clutch your breasts. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.